Commander Jake Martinez stared at the stars through the window of his spaceship. The UES Liberty was humanity's first ship that could travel faster than light. After 2 years of building and testing, they were finally ready to explore space beyond Earth's solar system. "Sir, we are getting close to the target star," said Captain Lisa Brooks. She was the ship's tactical officer and one of the best pilots Earth had ever trained. "Should we slow down?" Jake nodded. "Yes, bring us out of light speed. Let's see what we find out here." The Liberty dropped out of its faster-than-light travel. Around them, space looked empty except for distant stars. But their sensors showed something else. There were ships nearby. Big ships. "Captain Brooks, are you seeing this?" asked Chief Engineer Danny Parker from the engine room. His voice came through the ship's communication system. "These readings don't match anything in our database." Jake felt his heart beat faster. This was it. Humanity's first contact with alien life. He had dreamed of this moment since he was a child, but now that it was happening, he felt scared and excited at the same time. "All crew, this is the commander," Jake said into the ship's communication system. "We have detected unknown vessels. This could be first contact. Everyone stay calm and follow procedures." The alien ships were huge. Much bigger than the Liberty. They looked like metal snakes with sharp edges. Dark gray metal covered their hulls, and red lights blinked along their sides. As the human ship watched, 3 of the alien vessels turned toward them. "Incoming message," said Communications Officer Betty White, "but it's not in any language we know." "Can you translate it?" Jake asked. "Working on it, sir. The computer is trying to find patterns." Suddenly, the alien ships moved. They were fast, much faster than anything humans had built. In seconds, they surrounded the Liberty. "Sir, they're scanning us," Lisa said. Her hands moved quickly over her controls. Deep scans. "They're looking at everything. Our ship, our technology, even us." Jake made a decision. "Open a channel. All frequencies." "Channel open, sir." "This is Commander Jake Martinez of the Earth ship Liberty. We come in peace. We are explorers from the planet Earth." For a moment, nothing happened. Then one of the alien ships sent a message back. The Liberty's computer worked hard to translate it. When the words appeared on the screen, Jake felt cold. "Primitive mammals. New species detected. Beginning evaluation." "Evaluation?" Danny asked, over the communication system. "What kind of evaluation?" Before anyone could answer, the alien ships began to move in attack formation. Red beams of light shot from their weapons toward the Liberty. "Shields up," Jake shouted. Lisa's hands flew over her controls. The Liberty's shields activated just in time. The alien weapons hit the shields with tremendous force. The whole ship shook. "Shields holding, but not for long," Lisa reported. "These weapons are much more powerful than ours. Can we fight back?" Jake asked. "Our weapons are too weak," Lisa said, "but maybe we can outrun them." "Danny, can you give us more power?" Jake called to the engine room. "I'm trying, sir, but their technology is far ahead of ours." The aliens attacked again. This time, the Liberty's shields flickered and sparked. Jake knew they could not take many more hits like that. "Lisa, try evasive maneuvers. Show them what human pilots can do." Lisa smiled grimly. "Yes, sir." She pushed the Liberty into a sharp turn that would have crushed a normal human pilot. But humans had trained for years in high-gravity conditions. Lisa pulled moves that surprised even Jake. The Liberty spun and dove between the alien ships. Lisa used the ship's smaller size to her advantage, flying patterns that the big alien ships could not follow. "Sir, they're confused," reported Betty. "I'm picking up communications between their ships. They weren't expecting us to move like this." Danny's voice came from the engine room. "I've got an idea. What if we use their own weapons against them?" "What do you mean?" Jake asked. One of their energy beams missed us and hit some space debris. I saw how their weapons work. Maybe I can modify our shields to reflect their beams back at them. It was a crazy idea, but they were running out of options. Do it, Jake said. Dudney worked fast. Within minutes, he had changed the shield system. Ready, sir? But this will only work once. The alien ships attacked again. This time, instead of absorbing the energy, the Liberty's shields bounced it back. The reflected beam hit one of the alien ships, damaging its hull. The aliens stopped attacking. Jake could imagine their surprise. How had these primitive mammals turned their own weapons against them? Sir, they're retreating, Lisa said with amazement. The 3 alien ships pulled back, but they did not leave completely. They stayed at a distance, watching. Betty, any more communications? Jake asked. Yes, sir. They're talking to each other, but also sending messages to somewhere else, far away. Jake felt worried. The aliens were reporting to someone who would be very interested in what they had learned about humans. Over the following weeks, the Liberty tried to make peaceful contact with the aliens, but they would not respond to any messages. They just watched and studied. Unknown to the humans, the aliens were called the Kathmoran. They had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years through slavery. Every species they found was evaluated and classified. Most became slaves in their vast empire. Elder Seshik was the Kathmoran's chief evaluator. He had classified over 100 species in his long life, but the data coming from the human encounter was unlike anything he had ever seen. The humans had shown intelligence, creativity, and adaptability that exceeded his measurements. They had turned weakness into strength and found ways to fight back against superior technology. Most species panicked when first encountering the Kathmoran. These humans had fought back. Elder Seshik made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. He created a new classification in the Kathmoran database, Prime Stock. Every human would be valuable as a slave. Their homeworld would be completely harvested. The quantum markers were deployed around Earth's solar system. These invisible devices would study humanity for months, gathering data on human behavior, technology, and psychology. The information would help the Kathmoran plan the perfect attack. But Elder Seshik had made a mistake. He had classified Earth's greatest strength as weakness. The same traits that made humans valuable as slaves would make them the galaxy's most dangerous enemy. The markers were activated. Earth had been marked for slavery. The countdown to invasion had begun. Back on the Liberty, Jake Martinez stared at the alien ships in the distance. He did not know that his species had just been condemned to slavery. He only knew that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. Set course for Earth, he told Lisa. We need to warn them about what's out here. The Liberty turned toward home, not knowing that invisible markers were already watching Earth and its people. The galaxy's greatest predator had been marked as prey. Soon the universe would learn what happened when humans were pushed too far. 6 months had passed since Commander Jake Martinez returned to Earth with news of the alien encounter. The world had changed. Every nation worked together to prepare for what might come. New weapons were built, soldiers were trained, and defense systems were put in place around major cities. Colonel Ryan Mitchell stood on the roof of a building in New York City, looking at the morning sky. He was in charge of the city's defense. The military had given him the best soldiers and equipment available, but he knew it might not be enough. Sir, we're getting strange readings from our satellites, said Lieutenant Mark Johnson, running up to him with a tablet computer. All our communications are going down. Ryan looked at the screen. Across the world, satellite networks were failing. Television, internet, and radio signals were cutting out one by one. Then the lights went out. The electromagnetic pulse hit Earth like an invisible wave. In seconds, most of the planet's technology stopped working. Cars died on highways. Planes fell from the sky. The power grid collapsed. "This is it," Ryan said quietly. "They're here." The sky above New York began to change. Dark shapes appeared through the clouds. The alien ships were massive, each one bigger than a city block. They moved slowly, like giant predators stalking their prey. Similar scenes played out around the world. London, Tokyo, Moscow, and every other major city watched as alien ships filled their skies. The invasion had begun. Dr. Amy Carson was in her laboratory when the power failed. She had been studying the quantum markers that Jake Martinez's team had detected around Earth. Her equipment was specially shielded, so it still worked when everything else died. "My God," she whispered, looking at her readings. "They've been watching us for months." The data showed that the aliens had been studying human behavior, learning about their cities, their military, even their psychology. This was not a random attack. It was a carefully planned harvest. Amy grabbed her emergency radio and tried to contact the military. "This is Dr. Carson. The aliens have been preparing for this invasion for months. They know everything about us." Colonel Ryan Mitchell received the message just as the first alien landing ships appeared over Manhattan. These were smaller than the main ships, but still huge by human standards. They looked like flying pyramids made of dark metal. "All units. This is Colonel Mitchell," Ryan spoke into his radio. "The enemy is landing. Remember your training. Use the city itself as your weapon." The aliens expected an easy victory. They had conquered hundreds of worlds using the same tactics. Disable the technology, land troops, and round up the population. Most species surrendered within hours, but humans were different. As the first alien soldiers came out of their ships, they found the city strangely quiet. The streets seemed empty. Then the attacks began. Marine Sergeant Kevin Blake led his squad through the subway tunnels under Manhattan. They had been preparing for this moment for months. The tunnels were filled with improvised weapons and booby traps. "Remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight," Kevin told his men. "We're trying to make them bleed for every block." The Cathmoran soldiers were 7 feet tall, with scaled skin and claws. They carried energy weapons that could cut through steel, but they had never fought in a city designed to resist them. Kevin's squad attacked from sewers and basements. They used hit-and-run tactics, appearing from nowhere to strike, and then disappearing again. The aliens were confused. Their sensors showed humans everywhere, but they could not pin them down. Engineer Maya Rodriguez was working in a secret facility under the city. When the first alien transport crashed nearby, she led a team to capture it. The aliens inside were unconscious from the crash. "Careful," Maya warned her team. "We don't know what their technology can do." But Maya was an engineer. She understood machines, even alien ones. Within hours, she had figured out how their shield generators worked. The information was sent to resistance cells around the world. The aliens began to realize that this invasion was not going as planned. Humans did not panic like other species. Instead, they adapted. They learned. They fought back. In London, Captain Tom Wilson used the city's ancient tunnel system to move troops without being detected. In Tokyo, Commander Sarah Kim organized civilians to jam alien communications. In Moscow, General Ivan Petrov used the city's subway system as a fortress. The most shocking discovery came when humans began studying captured aliens. Dr. Amy Carson examined the first prisoners and found something disturbing. The aliens were not just conquerors, they were slavers. "They've done this before," Amy reported to the military command. "Hundreds of times. They capture entire species and sell them as slaves." This news spread quickly through the human resistance. The aliens were not just trying to conquer Earth. They were trying to enslave humanity. The effect was immediate. Human soldiers who had been fighting for their cities now fought for their freedom. The resistance became more fierce, more determined. Captain Jake Martinez, now commanding ground forces in Washington, D.C., led a daring raid on an alien command ship. His team used Maya's shield technology to sneak past the alien defenses. "Plant the charges on the engine room," Jake ordered. "We're going to send them a message." The explosion lit up the sky over Washington. The alien command ship crashed into the Potomac River. More importantly, humans had captured the ship's computers. Dr. Amy Carson analyzed the alien data files. What she found made her blood run cold. Earth was not the aliens' first target. They had enslaved dozens of worlds. The files showed species after species being captured, classified, and sold. "We're not the first," Amy reported to the Global Command, "but we might be the last if we don't stop them here." The war settled into a pattern. The aliens controlled the skies, but humans controlled the ground. Every city became a fortress. Every building became a weapon. The Kethmoran had expected to harvest Earth's population in a few weeks. Instead, they found themselves in the longest planetary battle in their history. Elder Seasick, commanding the invasion from his flagship, could not understand what was happening. His forces were superior in every way. Their technology was thousands of years ahead of humanity's. Yet the humans kept fighting. "Status report," he demanded from his commanders. "The mammals continue to resist," reported one of his officers. "They fight in ways we have never seen. They use their own cities as weapons. They turn our technology against us." Elder Seshik studied the battle reports. Humans were using tactics that did not exist in Kethmoran military doctrine. They fought from sewers and basements. They used improvised weapons. They coordinated attacks across vast distances without central command. "How many have we captured?" he asked. "Very few, Elder. The humans seem to prefer death to capture. And those we do capture, ... The officer hesitated. "What about the captives? They do not behave like normal slaves. They study us. They learn our weaknesses. Several have escaped and taken our equipment with them." Elder Seshik felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. In 3,000 years of conquest, no species had ever resisted this long. The humans were supposed to be primitive mammals, easy to defeat and enslave. But the data from the quantum markers had been wrong. These humans were not simple creatures. They were something else entirely. They were survivors. They were fighters. They were dangerous. On Earth, the resistance continued to grow. Colonel Ryan Mitchell coordinated with commanders around the world. They shared tactics, technology, and hope. "We're hurting them," Ryan reported to the Global Command. "They're bringing in more ships, more troops. That means they're losing." Dr. Amy Carson's research had revealed the aliens' greatest weakness. They had never faced a species that refused to surrender. Their entire military was designed for quick conquests against demoralized enemies. "They don't know how to fight a long war," Amy explained. "Their supply lines are stretched thin. Their troops are getting tired. And most importantly, they're afraid." The word spread through the human resistance. The aliens were afraid. The mighty Kethmoran Empire, rulers of the galaxy for thousands of years, were afraid of humanity. This knowledge changed everything. If the aliens could be afraid, they could be beaten. The humans had found hope in the darkest hour, but the war was far from over. The aliens still controlled space around Earth. They still had superior technology, and they were calling for reinforcements. The real battle was just beginning. 1 year had passed since the invasion began. The war had spread beyond Earth. Reports came from across the galaxy of other worlds, rising up against their Kethmoran masters. The human resistance had become a symbol of hope for enslaved species. Everywhere. Captain Sam Torres sat in the command chair of the KMS destroyer, a Kethmoran warship that his team had captured 3 months ago. The ship's original crew was now in the prison hold, learning what it felt like to be captives. "Target acquired," reported Lieutenant Carol Adams from the weapons station. "Kethmoran's supply convoy, 6 ships." Sam smiled grimly. "Attack pattern." Delta, let's show them what humans can do with their own technology. The captured destroyer moved with deadly precision. Sam's crew had learned to use alien weapons better than their original owners. The supply convoy never had a chance. Within minutes, all 6 ships were destroyed or captured. "Sir, we're getting a message from the Resistance," said Communications Officer Bill Thompson. "Dr. Wright has found something important." Dr. Helen Wright was one of Earth's best scientists. She had been working with captured alien technology for months, trying to understand how the Kethmoran Empire really worked. "Sam, you need to see this." Helen's voice came through the ship's communication system. "I've found the location of their main slave facility. It's on a moon called Zareth Prime." Sam felt his heart race. How many prisoners? Millions, maybe tens of millions. Species from all over the galaxy. Some have been enslaved for generations. The news spread quickly through the human resistance. Commander Jake Martinez, now leading the Liberation Fleet, called an emergency meeting of all resistance leaders. "This is our chance," Jake said to the gathered commanders. "We can free millions of people and strike a blow that will shake the Empire to its core." Colonel Ryan Mitchell, joining the meeting from Earth, was concerned. "It's heavily defended. The Kethmoran won't make the same mistakes they made here." Dr. Amy Carson, now working with the space-based resistance, had been studying the facility. Through stolen intelligence, it's not just a prison. It's a processing center. They break spirits there. They turn proud beings into broken slaves. The planning took weeks. The facility was protected by a massive fleet and energy shields that could stop any normal attack, but the humans had something the Kethmoran didn't expect: allies. Over the months of fighting, humans had rescued small groups of alien prisoners. These beings came from dozens of different worlds, each with their own skills and knowledge. They had formed the core of a multi-species resistance movement. Commander Jake Martinez stood before the assembled fleet. Human ships flew alongside vessels from the Veltar Republic, the Zephyrian Collective, and a dozen other species, all united by one goal: freedom. "Today we strike at the heart of the slave trade," Jake announced. "Today we show the galaxy that slavery ends now." The attack on Zareth Prime began with a diversion. Captain Sam Torres led a group of ships to attack the outer defenses, drawing the Kethmoran fleet away from the moon. While the enemy was distracted, Jake's main force used stolen cloaking technology to approach the facility unseen. The plan was risky, but it was the only way to get close enough to land troops. Dr. Helen Wright was with the landing force. She had modified human computer viruses to work with alien systems. If they could get her to the facility's main computer, she could shut down the entire operation. The landing was chaotic. Kethmoran forces on the moon were caught off guard, but they fought back hard. The facility was huge, a complex of buildings and tunnels carved into the moon's surface. Tech specialist Carlos Mendez led the team to the main computer center. The hallways were filled with holding cells, each one containing dozens of prisoners from different worlds. "My God," whispered Sergeant Lisa Parker as she saw the conditions. "How long have they been here?" Some of the prisoners looked like they had been captives for years. Others were recent arrivals, still showing the spirit that the Kethmoran tried to break. Carlos reached the computer center and began his work. "Helen, I'm in. Your virus is uploading now." Helen's virus was more than just a computer program. It was designed to turn the facility's own systems against the guards. Doors opened, releasing prisoners. Security systems shut down. The slave processing equipment began to malfunction. But the real change came from the prisoners themselves. When they saw humans fighting alongside other species to free them, something awakened in their hearts. Hope, a reptilian being from the Saurian worlds, grabbed a guard's weapon and began fighting alongside the humans. A bird-like creature from the avian cluster used its natural flying ability to scout ahead for the rescue teams. The liberation of Zerath Prime became a battle unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Dozens of species fought together, each using their unique abilities to overcome their captors. Elder Seshik watched the battle from his flagship with growing horror. The humans had done something impossible. They had united the galaxy's enslaved species against their masters. Elder, we're receiving surrender requests from our other territories, reported one of his officers. The rebellions are spreading. Our empire is collapsing. Seshik could not believe what he was seeing. 3,000 years of Kethmoran rule was crumbling because of one primitive species that refused to be slaves. Back on Zerath Prime, the battle was turning. The freed prisoners outnumbered their guards by thousands to one, but more importantly, they were fighting for their freedom. While the Kethmoran were fighting for a dying empire, Commander Jake Martinez made his way to the facility's main broadcast center. If he could send a message from here, it would reach every corner of the galaxy. This is Commander Jake Martinez of Earth 2, all enslaved peoples of the galaxy. Jake spoke into the alien communication system. The age of slavery is ending. Rise up. Fight back. You are not alone. The message was broadcast on every frequency, in every language. Across the galaxy, slaves in mines, factories, and pleasure palaces heard the words. The humans had shown them that freedom was possible. Dr. Amy Carson, monitoring communications from the captured destroyer, watched as the galaxy exploded into rebellion. It's working, she reported. Every system is reporting uprisings. The Kethmoran can't contain this. The battle for Zerath Prime ended with complete victory for the liberation forces. The facility that had processed millions of slaves was destroyed. The prisoners were free. But more importantly, the galaxy had learned that the Kethmoran Empire could be defeated. As the rescue ships evacuated the freed prisoners, many of them sought out the humans who had saved them. They wanted to understand how this young species had succeeded, where others had failed for thousands of years. "Why did you come for us?" asked a elderly being from the crystalline reaches. "We are not your people." Sergeant Kevin Blake, wounded, but alive, looked at the alien with tired eyes. "Because slavery is wrong. Because everyone deserves to be free. Because that's what humans do." The old being stared at him for a long moment. "Then humans are unlike any species we have known." The news of Zerath Prime's liberation spread across the galaxy, faster than light. The Kethmoran Empire, which had seemed invincible for millennia, was crumbling. Their military was stretched thin, trying to contain dozens of rebellions. Their economy was collapsing as slave labor disappeared, but the humans were not finished. They had learned something important from their victory. They were not just fighting for Earth anymore. They were fighting for the freedom of every enslaved being in the galaxy. Captain Sam Torres received new orders from Earth. "Sam, we're forming a new organization, the Galactic Liberation Corps. We need ships, crews, and commanders." Sam looked around the bridge of his captured destroyer. His crew was no longer just human. They had been joined by freed slaves from a dozen worlds, all united by their hatred of slavery and their admiration for human determination. "Count us in," Sam replied. "We have a galaxy too free." The war that had begun with Earth's invasion had become something much larger. It was no longer about one planet or one species. It was about the fundamental right of all sentient beings to live free. The Kethmoran Empire was dying, but the fight was far from over. There were still millions of slaves across the galaxy, still countless worlds under alien control. But now, they had hope, and they had humans to show them the way to freedom. 2 years had passed since the liberation of Zerath Prime. The galaxy was a different place now. The mighty Kethmoran Empire had broken apart into dozens of smaller territories, most of which had given up slavery to avoid human retaliation. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, humanity's new flagship. The ship was a marvel of engineering, combining human innovation with technology from dozens of liberated worlds. Her crew included former slaves, who had become some of the galaxy's most skilled warriors. "Admiral, we're approaching the Kethmor stronghold at Beta Centauri," reported Commander Nick Davis. He led the ship's special operations team, a group of humans and aliens who specialized in liberating slave facilities. Kate nodded. "What do we know about their defenses?" "Heavy," replied Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos, the ship's intelligence officer. "They've learned from our previous attacks. But they're still thinking like slavers, not like soldiers." The difference was important. The Kethmoran military had been designed to terrorize and control civilian populations. They had never faced an enemy that fought back with such determination and skill. Captain Emma Stone was leading a diplomatic mission to the Veltar Republic when the attack on Beta Centauri began. The Veltar were neutral traders who had stayed out of the war, but Emma's job was to change that. "Ambassador Velkith," Emma said to the reptilian diplomat, "the galaxy is changing. The old order is dying. You can be part of the new order, or you can go down with the Empire." The Veltar had been trading with the Kethmoran for centuries, buying and selling slaves like any other commodity. But they had also been watching the human liberation campaigns with growing interest. "Your species is remarkable," Ambassador Velkith admitted. "We have never seen such determination, but the Kethmorans still have powerful fleets." Emma smiled. Not for long. At that moment, the attack on Beta Centauri was reaching its climax. The Kethmoran defenders fought desperately, but they were facing something they had never encountered: coordinated attacks by multiple species working together. Commander Nick Davis led his team through the facility's lower levels, where the worst horrors of slavery were kept. These were the breaking chambers, where the Kethmoran destroyed the spirits of their captives. "Clear the cells," Nick ordered. "Get everyone out." His team included Sergeant Carlos Mendez, who had become an expert at alien technology, and Dr. Peter Johnson, who provided medical care for the freed prisoners. But it was the alien members of his team who made the biggest difference. A warrior from the Mantis worlds used her natural camouflage to scout ahead. A technician from the Silicon Collective could interface directly with computer systems. "Nick, you need to see this," Dr. Johnson called from one of the cells. Inside was a young Kethmoran, barely more than a child by their standards. "Please," the young alien said in broken English. "I do not want to be like them. I want to be free." Nick stared at the young Kethmoran. The liberation forces had encountered few enemy civilians, and certainly no children. This was a reminder that even the slavers had families, had young ones, who might choose differently. "You're safe now," Nick said gently. "No one will hurt you." The psychological impact on the remaining Kethmoran forces was devastating. They had built their entire society on the belief that they were superior to other species. Now, they were losing battles to the very beings they had considered inferior. "Admiral," Kate Sullivan received reports from across the galaxy. The liberation campaigns were succeeding beyond anyone's expectations. But the real change was happening in the hearts and minds of the galaxy's peoples. "Admiral, we're getting requests for assistance from 17 different star systems," reported Communications Officer Betty White. "They want help establishing free governments." Kate felt the weight of responsibility. Humans had become more than liberators. They had become teachers, showing other species how to govern themselves without slavery or oppression. Dr. Andrew Clark, now serving as the fleet's chief analyst, had been studying the broader implications of the war. "Kate, we're not just ending slavery. We're spreading human concepts of individual rights and democracy across the galaxy." The irony was not lost on any of them. The species that had been marked for slavery was now becoming the galaxy's greatest force for freedom. The battle for Beta Centauri ended with another decisive victory for the liberation forces. But more importantly, it proved that the Kethmoran were no longer the galaxy's dominant military power. Elder Seshik, one of the few remaining Kethmoran leaders, watched the defeat from his hidden fortress. His empire was gone. His people were scattered. And it was all because of one species that refused to be enslaved. Elder, the humans are requesting surrender negotiations, reported his last remaining aide. SSC felt something that no Kethmoran had experienced in 3,000 years, fear of judgment. The humans had a reputation for treating prisoners fairly, but they also had a reputation for never forgetting injustice. What do they want? He asked. Complete cessation of all slave operations, full reparations to liberated peoples, and trials for war criminals. War criminals. The humans had introduced that concept to the galaxy. The idea that some acts were so terrible that they deserved punishment, even in war. Meanwhile, Captain Sam Torres was leading a different kind of mission. His ship, the Liberation, was escorting a convoy of freed slaves back to their home worlds. Many of these beings had been enslaved for so long that they had no memory of freedom. Captain, we're approaching the Zephyrian homeworld, reported. His navigator, a former slave who had become one of the galaxy's best pilots. Sam looked at the planet below. It had been stripped of resources by the Kethmoran, its people scattered across the galaxy as slaves. But now the Zephyrians were coming home. Take us down, Sam ordered. Let's see what freedom looks like. The scene on the planet's surface was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Cities had been destroyed, but the returning Zephyrians were already beginning to rebuild. They were using human engineering techniques alongside their own traditional methods. One of the Zephyrian elders approached Sam as he walked through the reconstruction site. Captain Torres, we owe you a debt we can never repay. Sam shook his head. You don't owe us anything. You've earned your freedom with your own courage. The elder studied him with large, multifaceted eyes. You humans are strange. You fight for others as fiercely as you fight for yourselves. Why? Sam thought about the question. It was something that many aliens had asked, and humans themselves were still trying to understand. Because we know what it's like to be afraid, Sam said finally. We know what it's like to face something bigger and stronger than us. We know what it's like to be told we're worthless. So when we see others facing the same thing, we can't just walk away. The elder nodded slowly. That is wisdom. That is why you will succeed where others have failed. Back on Earth, the global government was struggling to cope with their new role as the galaxy's liberators. President Rachel Scott addressed the United Nations and the world. We never asked to be the galaxy's police force, she said. We just wanted to be free. But freedom isn't something you can keep for yourself. It's something you have to share, or you'll lose it. The speech was broadcast across the galaxy, translated into hundreds of languages. On thousands of worlds, beings who had never heard of Earth or humans listened to the words of their liberators. Dr. Amy Carson, now director of the Galactic Liberation Corps, was working on the next phase of the war. The major Kethmoran territories had been defeated, but there were still smaller groups of slavers operating throughout the galaxy. Amy, we're getting reports of a new kind of resistance, reported Colonel Ryan Mitchell, now serving as the Corps' military commander. Some of the freed worlds are asking for human advisors to help them build their own defense forces. Amy smiled. That's exactly what we want. We can't protect everyone forever. They need to learn to protect themselves. The transformation was remarkable. Species that had been enslaved for generations were learning to fight for their own freedom. They were adopting human tactics, human technology, and human values. But the greatest change was psychological. The galaxy had learned that slavery was not inevitable, that freedom was possible, that even the mightiest empire could fall if enough people refused to accept oppression. The war was far from over. There were still millions of slaves across the galaxy, still countless injustices to correct. But the tide had turned. The hunters had become the hunted. The species that had been marked for slavery was now the galaxy's greatest hope for freedom. And the universe was learning what humans had always known, that freedom was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. 5 years had passed since the first alien ships appeared over Earth. The galaxy was transformed. The Cathmoran Empire was history. Slavery had been abolished across most of known space, and humanity had gone from being marked for slavery to becoming the galaxy's guardians of freedom. General Alex Thompson stood in the command center of the Galactic Liberation Corps' headquarters on Earth. The facility buzzed with activity as beings from dozens of worlds worked together to coordinate anti-slavery operations across the galaxy. "General, we have a priority alert," reported Captain Lisa Parker, now serving as the Corps' operations coordinator. "The remaining Cathmoran forces are massing for a final attack." Alex studied the tactical display. The enemy fleet was huge, gathering ships from every corner of their former empire. Their target was obvious, Earth itself. "They think if they can destroy our home world, they can restore their empire," Alex said grimly. "They're wrong." The irony was complete. The world that had been marked for slavery was now the target of the galaxy's last desperate slavers. But Earth was no longer the defenseless planet it had been 5 years ago. Commander Rachel Scott, daughter of the former president, led the orbital defense fleet. Her ships were crewed by humans and aliens working side by side, all united by their commitment to freedom. "General Thompson, the defense fleet is ready," Rachel reported. "We have ships from 47 different worlds. They all want to protect Earth." It was a remarkable sight. The planet that had been condemned to slavery was now defended by the very beings who had once been slaves themselves. Dr. Andrew Clark, now the Corps' chief historian, watched the enemy fleet approach. He had spent years documenting the transformation of the galaxy, and he understood the deeper meaning of this final battle. "Alex, this isn't just about Earth," he said. "If we win here, it will prove that the age of slavery is truly over. If we lose, ... Alex nodded. "We won't lose. We can't lose. Too many people are counting on us." The battle for Earth began as the sun rose over the Pacific Ocean. The Cathmoran fleet, desperate and vicious, threw everything they had at the planet. But they faced something they had never encountered, a truly united defense. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos, now commanding the ground-based defense systems, coordinated with the orbital fleet. "All batteries, fire at will. Show them what Earth defends with." The planet's surface erupted with defensive fire. Weapons built with technology from dozens of worlds blazed upward at the attacking fleet. But the real strength of Earth's defense was not in its weapons. It was in the hearts of those who fought. Admiral Kate Sullivan, commanding the defense fleet from the bridge of the UES Freedom, watched as enemy ships broke through the outer defenses. "All ships, remember what we're fighting for. Not just Earth, but every free world in the galaxy." The battle was fierce. The Cathmoran fought with the desperation of a dying empire, but they were fighting beings who had learned what freedom meant, who had tasted liberty, and would never give it up. Commander Nick Davis led boarding parties onto enemy ships. His teams included former slaves who had become elite warriors. They fought not just with human tactics, but with the fury of beings who had been enslaved and freed. "Secure the bridge," Nick ordered as they fought through a Cathmoran battleship. "Take their communications. I want to send a message to any of their forces still fighting." The message Nick sent was simple: surrender now, or share the fate of your empire. Across the galaxy, the remaining Cathmoran forces heard the message. Most chose surrender rather than destruction. The age of their empire was truly over, but the battle for Earth was not yet won. Elder Seshik, the architect of humanity's enslavement, led the final assault personally. His flagship, the Dominator, was the largest ship ever built by the Cathmoran. It carried enough firepower to destroy a planet. "Today, the mammals die," Seshik declared to his crew. "Today, we restore the natural order." But the natural order had changed. As the Dominator approached Earth, it was met by something unprecedented, a unified fleet of former slaves, all fighting to protect their liberators, Captain Sam Torres, now commanding a multi-species task force, led the attack on the Dominator. His fleet included ships from every corner of the galaxy, all crewed by beings who owed their freedom to humanity. All ships, concentrate fire on the Dominator, Sam ordered. End this once and for all. The battle was epic. The Dominator's weapons could destroy entire fleets. But it faced something that had never existed before, a galaxy united in defense. Of freedom. Dr. Amy Carson, watching from the Liberation Corps' command center, saw the deeper meaning of the battle. They're not just fighting for Earth, she said. They're fighting for the idea that freedom is worth dying for. The Dominator was a powerful ship, but it could not stand against the combined fury of the galaxy's liberated peoples. One by one, its systems failed under the concentrated assault. Eldasek, his ship dying around him, made one final transmission. You have not won, he said. Without us, the galaxy will fall into chaos. You need masters. You need rulers. The response came from an unexpected source, a young Kethmoran officer who had been freed from a slave facility years earlier. We choose freedom, the young alien said. Even if it means chaos, we choose freedom. The Dominator exploded in a flash of light visible from Earth's surface. With it died the last hope of the Kethmoran Empire. The galaxy was free. The celebration that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. On thousands of worlds, beings who had been slaves just years before danced in the streets. Children who had been born free played games that their parents had never been allowed to play. But the real victory was not in the destruction of the Kethmoran. It was in what came next. President Jennifer Hayes, Earth's new leader, addressed the galaxy from the United Nations building. Today, we proved that freedom is not just a human concept. It belongs to every thinking being in the universe. The speech was broadcast across the galaxy, translated into hundreds of languages. On worlds that had never heard of democracy, beings began to organize their own governments. On planets that had known only slavery, children learned to read and write. General Alex Thompson, now director of the Galactic Liberation Corps, faced a new challenge. The galaxy was free, but it needed to learn how to stay free. Our job isn't finished, he told his staff. We've ended slavery, but now we have to help the galaxy learn to govern itself. The Corps evolved from a military organization into something new, a combination of peacekeeping force, diplomatic service, and educational institution. They helped former slave worlds establish governments, taught species about individual rights, and stood ready to defend freedom wherever it was threatened. Dr. Andrew Clark documented the transformation in his historical records. The species that was marked for slavery became the galaxy's teachers of freedom, he wrote. They showed the universe that liberty was not a privilege to be granted, but a right to be defended. The galaxy had learned something important from humanity, that freedom was not just about being free from oppression, but about being free to choose your own destiny. Former slave worlds began to develop their own cultures, their own technologies, their own ways of life. Captain Emma Stone, now serving as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, watched as representatives from hundreds of worlds worked together to solve problems peacefully. This is what we fought for, she said. Not just to end slavery, but to create something better. The young Kethmoran, who had defied Elder Seshik, became a symbol of the new galaxy. He worked with the Liberation Corps to help other members of his species learn to live without slavery. It was not easy, but it was possible. We were taught that we were superior, he said in a speech to the Galactic Council. But the humans showed us that true superiority comes from lifting others up, not holding them down. 5 years after the final battle, the galaxy had achieved something that had seemed impossible, peace based on freedom rather than oppression. There were still problems, still conflicts, still But there was also hope. Commander Jake Martinez, now retired but still serving as an advisor to the Liberation Corps, stood in his garden on Earth, looking up at the stars. His granddaughter played nearby, a child who had been born into a free galaxy. "Grandpa," the little girl asked, "why did the bad aliens want to make people slaves?" Jake thought about the question. It was one that historians and philosophers would debate for generations. "Because they were afraid," he said finally. "They were afraid of what would happen if everyone was free. But everyone should be free," the girl said with the certainty of a child. Jake smiled. "Yes, they should. And because of what your grandparents did, now they are." The galaxy had learned a lesson that would never be forgotten, that freedom was worth fighting for, that slavery was never acceptable, and that even the mightiest empire could fall if enough people refused to accept oppression. The species that had been marked for slavery had become the galaxy's greatest force for freedom, and the universe was a better place because of it. The war was over, the galaxy was free, and humanity had fulfilled its destiny not as slaves, but as liberators.